Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our weekly support group check-in. So I'm very happy that you were able to join us today for this lunchtime session. We're going to have a good amount of fun today talking about something that at least I know I hear about often in individual sessions around managing eating cues, and dealing with cravings and external factors that can drive people to eat or not eat, drink or not drink. So really excited to get started. So reminder, I am Colleen Tewksbury. I'm the Bariatric Program Manager. I'm also a dietitian by training. And I've been the moderator for most of these sessions. We'll have rotating in a few other moderators as we move forward. So today we have Dr. Erica Schulte, who earned her PhD from the University of Michigan and completed her fellowship at the Medical University of South Carolina. She is a postdoctoral fellow with the Center for Weight and Eating Disorders, specializing in how the food environment and processed junk foods contribute to overeating and having a higher body weight. Dr. Schulte has published 25 peer-reviewed articles in the area, and her work has been covered by popular media outlets like Forbes and Huffington Post. So we have a true expert with us today. So very excited to have Erica here with us today. And we're hoping, as with others, for work from home or remote work at this point. Erica did just share with me that she is an adorable golden doodle. That we are hoping Franklin that will join us potentially for today. We'll see if we see Franklin in the background, and you may see my pup walking around as well, Luna. So always fun to have pets join us. So we're excited to have Erica here, and I will hand things over to her to dive into the topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Colleen, for the introduction and for inviting me to speak today. I'm really looking forward to talking with you all about this topic. I think it's very important and often overlooked. So what I will invite you to do at various times, I'll definitely provide questions or prompts that you're welcome to respond to. But if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just because of the time delay, feel free to type them in, and Colleen will make sure that they get answered. So anytime something pops up, feel free to type it in the Q&A. And I'll just kind of talk through my presentation, and then we'll have a nice discussion at the end. So I have really two primary goals for today. The first is to describe the importance of managing your food environment in order to set yourself up for success. And then we're going to talk about some specific key tips for reducing triggering food cues, using the holidays as an example, because I know this is a really higher risk, sometimes problematic time, but it's also a time to relax and enjoy and be with family and try to reduce some of the emphasis on food and kind of managing that. So the more work you can do ahead of time, the better. And we'll talk about what some of those specifics could look like. I want to start by talking about willpower because it's something that is a really common part of the narrative when people are trying to lose weight and kind of stick to these long-term changes, and it just kind of thinking about willing yourself to do this and how that has or maybe hasn't been effective for you. So you can definitely respond to some of these questions in the chat box if they're of interest to you, but I want you to really think about whether trying harder has either gotten you to achieve your goals, or if you believe that just trying harder will get you to where you want to be. And if you've ever felt like it's your fault, if you have kind of gone off of a diet, meaning you ate something you didn't feel like you should have, or you skipped a workout, or just kind of fallen off the wagon and really felt a lot of that blame and shame for doing so. So if any of those are common experiences for you, feel free to kind of talk about that in the chat box. But it's definitely this kind of popular narrative around what weight loss looks like. Just try harder. So I want to talk about the truth and the myth in that statement. So it is true that you do have ultimate control over what you eat. I can't really convince anyone otherwise, but there are these significant environmental influences that can sway your decisions more than you might think. So the way that I like to look at this is, kind of thinking about if I had a big bowl of one of my favorite, foods that are kind of the higher calorie junk food types of things on my desk all day long. I find myself talking, doing therapy for many hours a day. I'm a little stressed out sometimes, a little fatigued by the end of the day. How much of that particular food do you think I would eat as opposed to if I didn't have the food in my house? And when I pose it like that, it might seem silly, but it encourages us to maybe think about all of the ways that our environment interacts with us in ways that are very important. And that's what I mean when I'm thinking about these environmental influences. Importantly, I think this narrative about personal responsibility, meaning that you and only you have control over your weight, can be kind of stigmatizing because odds are you are already trying very hard and have tried very hard in the past, maybe successful in the short term, maybe in the long term it was more challenging. But when people put that solely on your shoulders, it can feel really yucky and stigmatizing. So I want to just acknowledge that there is this whole other influence that really needs to be considered that can just relieve some of that pressure for, this isn't really your fault. There's nothing that you've done wrong. And there's these fine-tuning changes we can make in the environment that really could be helpful for you long term. Another way of looking at this is to just kind of think about what's been happening over the past couple of decades, where body weights all over the world have been increasing in the last 50 years. And so I'm wondering, could we really say that people have become less responsible for their weight in the past 50 years? Or might there be this other layer where the food environment has become a lot more triggering, meaning there's many more processed foods and convenience foods. They're all over the place. They're really affordable as well. So there are these kind of higher calorie, really accessible foods that make weight management more of a challenge. So I think when we look at it this way, it's undeniable that there is this important environmental influence that needs to be considered. So a couple examples of this in our environment. Some of these pictures I took myself, some are from the internet, but this is a checkout lane at CVS, and we can see that all of these items here below are candy, easy to grab, single serving. You can just kind of grab it as you're checking out, and it's just right there waiting for you. You can also see a lot of sale tags on there, so just advertising how affordable and easy these things are to grab. Also, driving down a street, you can see tons of options for fast food, and some of these logos on this stock image were replaced for places that weren't allowing them to use copyright, so they're not all McDonald's, but it's just a way to kind of demonstrate how easy it is to drive through, open 24 hours most of these places, and get these high-calorie processed types of foods. Another kind of eating setting that can be really triggering for people are buffets that, again, are often kind of high calorie types of foods. If you're thinking kind of like an Asian buffet, that's what's pictured here. There's a lot of fried foods, finger foods, easy to eat and high in calories. Also in morning meetings, we're being offered bagels, and cream cheese and donuts, which again, don't always have the highest nutrition profile or the longest staying power, but it's what's available. So if you show up hungry, this is your option. So I just really wanted to highlight all of these different ways that our environment is really saturated with these higher calorie types of processed foods that are super affordable, super easy to get to, and are definitely playing some role in weight management. So that kind of brings us to where we are now in the calendar year, which is thinking about holidays as an example of how we can kind of leverage some of this information about the environment to get really specific about how you can make subtle changes to help you stick to your goals and just reduce the influence of food on your holiday experience. So you're not experiencing that anxiety or worry ahead of time. You're not having guilt afterwards. You can really settle in to the other things that you can enjoy about the holidays, like being with family and friends and connecting, even if it's in some odd virtual format, at least it's kind of something that really connects to who you are as a person. That's, very important, very consistent with your values. So all of these reasons are why I really focus on helping my patients manage their food environment as one of the primary targets of weight management treatment. It is just as important as a lot of these practical tools that I know you all have been working really hard at, like logging your food, making sure you're getting in physical activity. the environment can set you up in a way that can help those things be more likely to happen, or can get in the way to make it less likely to happen. So that's why I really care deeply about this this layer of the process. So what focusing on the environment tangibly means is reducing negative triggers that can lead to overeating, and at the same time increasing positive triggers that can promote more this goal-directed behavior. So healthy eating, physical activity, logging your food, all of those things that have been working hard to do. So to illustrate this, I want to kind of talk through a holiday scenario with two different people, and you can kind of tell me who you think will be more successful. Again, feel free to put this in the chat box. So person one shows up to holiday dinner with the pie that they bake every year. You might have either heard someone say this or you've said it yourself at some time, but if I don't make this, it's just not the holidays, or I have to have these cookies around because my son's coming into town and he loves them. So this kind of idea of nostalgia around certain foods. This person also didn't eat all day long in order to save calories for the meal, so they're coming in really, really hungry. They promise themselves that they're going to watch what they eat, again, kind of thinking about that willpower perspective. And they don't really tell their family members about their weight management goals because they are either embarrassed about it, or they feel like they don't need help, or even kind of playing into that responsibility narrative, they feel like they should be able to do this on their own. So that's person one. Person two instead brings a low-calorie, nutritious fruit plate as a dessert alternative to make sure that they have a healthy option. So they are looking out for themselves here of what am I going to do at dessert, assuming that would be a higher risk period. They ate high protein and high fiber foods during the day so that they're going into the meal feeling moderately hungry. They have a specific plan for which foods to eat and the portion size that they intend to eat. So that might look different for different foods. If you want to indulge in a particular food that you've been looking forward to, being specific about the portion size is a way to do that in a controlled way. And then they ask one of their family members to go on a walk with them after the meal. So maybe they're still not comfortable revealing their entire kind of process with weight management, but they know that having that physical activity after the meal would be helpful, so they loop someone in for some accountability. So you might have guessed person two is definitely the example here that's kind of implementing some of these strategies that we're going to break down in a second. So getting specific about the differences, the first thing is removing these negative cues. So first, person two did not bring that pie that they feel like, is necessary in order for it to be a holiday. Instead, they brought something that is kind of looking out for themselves, right? They're making sure they have that alternative, knowing that there will probably be more than one dessert and could coordinate with a host that way. They're also preventing being overly hungry. So if you've ever gone grocery shopping on an empty stomach, you're a lot more likely to pull things into your cart that just look good. The same thing happens here when you are, sitting down at a family meal or holiday meal or out with friends socializing. And if you go in starving, everything's going to look good, and you're going to have a harder time following through with a more moderate, intentional type of plan because you're just so darn hungry. And I don't blame you. I think it's very difficult to make decisions from that place. So you want to set yourself up for success there. And then this person created a plan and got really specific. So we'll talk more about that in a sec for what that needs to look like, but going in with this intention of I should be able to do this and I'm just going to watch what I eat and I should be able to follow through with that, that's relying on pressure and willpower, and that's not as helpful as kind of setting those specific intentions. So person number two also added a bunch of positive cues. So they brought that healthy alternative to a triggering part of the meal by bringing the fruit to dessert. They had filling and low-calorie foods throughout the day to increase their satisfaction and make it easier to choose healthy options. You can kind of think of this like building your foundation and then being able to kind of stand on it more firmly and make those next decisions instead of just being in such a biological state of deprivation. It's a lot harder to make decisions there. They also made specific plans for the types of foods and what portion sizes, again, just taking the guesswork out of eating decisions, which relieves a lot of that food anxiety. And then they increased accountability by asking for support from a family member by asking to go on a walk afterwards. So I'd like you to think about your own experience at holiday meals and be really honest with yourself about the negative environmental influences that you want to reduce. Step one to all of this is recognizing your own triggers. So if you're comfortable, feel free to type some into the chat box and we can talk about it when we get to the discussion, if you're comfortable sharing those. So some questions you might ask yourself are, when are you most likely to eat more than you intend to? Is it the entree? Is it dessert? Maybe it's wine. Which foods do you tend to overeat? And why are you more likely to overeat? Is it because you feel stressed out? Do you have family traditions around cleaning your plate, for instance, that you know your grandmother's going to be upset about if you don't? Or are you nostalgic? Do you have this idea that, you're only going to get this food once a year, so you need to eat as much of it as you can because it's going away? What I would encourage you to do, whether it's now or later, is to really write these things down and be very, very specific. The second step here is to replace the negative with the positive. So kind of thinking about each of those questions from the prior slide, if you know when you're more likely to overeat, you can kind of implement some strategies to combat that specific time period. So for instance, you can make sure you have a healthy option for yourself, even offering to bring it if needed at that part of the meal that seems to be higher risk. You can loop in a family member for accountability during that time if there's someone you're comfortable talking to, like setting your intentions of, could we split this dessert, for instance, in order to kind of reduce how many calories I'm getting while still feeling like I'm getting part of it. You can also offer to help with tasks during this time, like helping to clear dishes after the meal or playing with younger family members to reduce the time that you're actually sitting at the table present during dessert. Just picking on dessert here as an example for walking through things. If you know which foods you tend to overeat, you can bring a healthier copycat version of that food. A quick Google search for either healthy or low calorie, whatever it is, pumpkin pie. You can kind of find those recipes readily available online, and quick substitutions as well. So subbing out like applesauce for butter, and all of that is just, a lot of people are doing this online. So there's great communities. Skinny Taste is a specific one. If you are interested, I know she has wonderful recipes that are kind of the family traditional holiday meals and substitutes for those specific items. And again, asking someone to split something with you, who maybe you have someone else who's also trying to kind of set these goals for weight management and those types of things. Those are really great people to loop in. Anyone who is knowledgeable as you're preparing for or recovering from surgery and just knows that process, these are great support. So don't feel like you should be able to do this alone or have to. I think it's very helpful when you can draw on your people to help you in these ways. And when you know why you're more likely to overeat, this is also very important. So if it relates to stress, for instance, maybe being around your family is stressful to begin with, or all of the preparations of cleaning your home and getting things ready, and there's a lot that goes into holiday meals. So if it's stress management, you could think of maybe light, gentle physical activity like going on a walk as being something that could be, again, setting your foundation. So you're going in with your cup full, essentially, maybe meditating beforehand, again, calling someone, looping in your support system, but just doing something that makes you feel taken care of, because all of these changes you're making to your eating, to increasing physical activity, in a way, it's all to take better care of yourself. So if you can show up for yourself on that day, you're more likely to keep that momentum going with additional self-care, like eating foods that make your body feel good. If family traditions are playing a role here, like the clean your plate mentality, or I have a lot of people who, their families show love through food. I'm dating someone who's Italian, and this is a big thing in their family. So, and my mom's Jewish, so it's just a very, the family traditions are very influential. So one of the ways that you can speak to family members about this are, I appreciate the work that you went to, so that they know that, all of their effort was not acknowledged by you. But you can say the best way you can support me, or the best way you could show me love right now, is to, not push food on me, or is to let me have my substitute without you saying anything or looking at me, or just knowing that is recognizing that I need to prioritize myself. So being specific, the best way to show me love right now is, and then whatever that is for you. And the nostalgia is something that, I think it's helpful to kind of poke back on a little bit of, but I only ever get this dish at Thanksgiving, whatever that is. If we think about in our lives, all the holidays, all the celebrations, all the special dinners, they really are a lot. And so this is the thought we can kind of tell ourselves to try to trick ourselves into doing something that might interfere with your goals. So what I would encourage you to do is to really think of the 1 or 2 foods maybe that you really want to prioritize that are worth those calories, and you could plan to kind of fit in with the bigger picture. And think about those, but there are compromises with some of this that need to be made. So it's really about figuring out what those puzzle pieces are for you that can help you enjoy the holiday and the yummy foods that come with it, but aren't the full picture of what you may have eaten in the past that made you feel guilty. So what I care about most is just removing that guilt and shame at the end of the meal. So that requires us to kind of strike a balance to figure out which foods fit and which foods don't. Some bonus tips here are, again, do not go in starving. It is so hard to make decisions from a place of just being very hungry or hungry, angry, hangry, as you may have heard it. It's very difficult to do that. So just make sure that you aren't going in starving. Usually saving your calories for the meal for most people just leads to more overeating and more calories at the end of the day than if you had a moderate, high protein, high fiber lunch, and then we're going into the meal moderately hungry. It's a lot easier to make decisions that way. You can also start with a salad or a broth or vegetable-based soup as a way to get some nutrients in, higher volume, lower calories. Staying hydrated and limiting alcohol consumption, not just because alcohol has calories, but because it can make that piece of pie or second piece of pie look even more tempting. So keeping in mind how you react, there's my dog, to alcohol. Making a very specific plan about which foods you eat and approximately how much of that food you're going to eat can be really helpful. I would encourage you, if you think this could be useful to you, to do it ahead of time. So make that plan, maybe talk with the host, or if you are hosting, even more power to you. Or if you're doing something electronic, some of this might be even easier to figure out, is just to kind of pre-track what that meal could look like. So you intend to have the turkey, this much sweet potato, this much green beans, half of a piece of pie, or whatever that looks like for you specifically, depending on where you're at in this process. But be specific and put it in MyFitnessPal or Bariatric so that you have that game plan, your blueprint. You can just go into the meal and enjoy it, and you don't have to think twice because you've already done the hard planning work. Also encourage you to just eat slowly and mindfully enjoy the plan that you made for yourself. So if you plan to have some mashed potatoes and some pumpkin pie, eat it slowly and enjoy it, because you are making it work if it's coming in from a place of intention. So, there's nothing about these foods that you need to completely stay away from forever, but just acknowledging the way that you can eat them that doesn't lead to that guilt later is really important. So planning ahead, enjoying them slowly, paying attention to when you start to be full, all of that is really important. And importantly, also, don't take home leftovers. This is something that you might want to talk with the host about ahead of time, especially if it's someone who's a food pusher. This is a great time to implement that skill of the best way you could support me right now is, or the best way you could show me love is, and I know you went to all this trouble, but this is kind of the boundary I need to set. Just another way to gently prioritize yourself. And then the last tip here is just to have a plan for a healthy morning and afternoon. So you're not kind of going into the day feeling like, well, tonight's going to be a disaster. I'm definitely going to go off of my plan. There's no such thing. Get that momentum building in the morning and the afternoon, whatever it takes to make your cup feel full, whether it's stress management, eating healthy, doing some light physical activity, and then also a plan for the very next day. So that could be another way you could loop in family. If you do happen to travel and stay with someone, you could ask someone to go for a walk with you the very next morning, just to continue to set that tone and challenge the mindset of I'm on the diet or I'm off the diet. There's really no such thing. It's really just this continuous journey, and we need to talk back to some of those thoughts that feel really rigid and absolute so that you can just kind of enjoy your meal and then get right back to it, and also make that plan so it doesn't feel like you've strayed too far. So I will open it up for questions now. My email is also on here. If anything comes up that you want to ask me later, as you get closer to the date, you are more than welcome to reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions. But what I am going to do is I will just close this so I can see Colleen because we are going to chat next. Can you see me now?
So I just pushed myself through actually for this transition, and then we'll bring you back on, and I can see you fully, and we'll toggle back and forth between the two of us. So starting off here, let's have a little bit of a recap of what's happening in the chat here, and we have a few questions. So some fantastic ideas in here. Cheryl had made some comments about having to cancel traveling to Tennessee to see family, which is, I cannot emphasize this enough, the smartest thing to do right now with COVID, to really celebrate with those in your household right now. But planning ahead with little pre-portioned containers and thinking ahead with portion sizes. We also have a few comments in here. We had heard from others about having just within their household smaller groups, make it easier to be able to try out new recipes. You're not cooking for a crowd. That can also be helpful. So lots of great conversation there. But a question that came up from Deborah here, who has a surgery date with Dr. Williams coming up on December 1st. Good luck, Deborah, coming into that 2-week diet. I think you're just starting off on, so you got this. We have a question for you, Erica, from her around how does this apply, if at all, to really distinguishing between hunger or between boredom hunger and head hunger?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when it comes to cravings, making sure your physiological hunger is met is really kind of the first priority. So the question that could help you kind of discern this is essentially, are you hungry for whatever healthy snack is in your refrigerator, or is there a particular thing that sounds good that seems to be getting a little more stuck? Like, I really could go for a chocolate chip cookie right now, but if you have, carrot sticks and hummus in your fridge ready to go that are, ready for your physical hunger, but that doesn't sound quite good, that's sometimes a sign that you might be having more of a craving than trying to satisfy physical hunger. This is also why I really try to emphasize the importance of not going into a more triggering type of situation being hungry, because if you are very, very hungry, so having that foundation set can help you be a little more in tune with, all right, there's a hunger pain. I'm going to try to fill up on this type of food that's maybe higher in first, and then see what your body's saying. If that chocolate chip cookie just keeps sticking around no matter how much healthy food you eat, it's probably a craving. So my advice would be to try to satisfy physical hunger first, go for those nutritious foods, and then see what your body is saying to you. Maybe the message will get a little bit quieter, maybe it will go away, maybe it will be really loud and you can label it as a craving.
All right, excellent. And we do have another question that came in earlier today. So we have from Joanne, and if this is something that you want dietitian input on, let me know. But can artificial sweeteners trigger hunger?
Such a good question. And Colleen, I definitely will have you part 2 this, but my familiarity with the research is really around cravings specifically. So I'm kind of from that psychology standpoint. So I look a lot at influences on people's experiences with food. So interesting research around artificial sweeteners is essentially when you're looking at someone's response to blood sugar and how much it kind of triggers that pleasure system. It's a very high response to regular sugar. And when you give an artificial sweetener, it's about halfway. So you're still getting some pleasure from the sweetness. And there's been a limited amount of research that shows that sometimes when you kind of set your mind up to expect sweetness, but you don't get the sugar for your body to use and metabolize, that can lead you to have some more cravings for sweet things. But there's been like 2 really good studies in this area, so it's really still in its infancy. So I'll let Colleen share anything else she also knows, but if you've experienced that, it's not all in your head. There is something there.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, Erica, but I think it all comes down to, right, even for those studies, that's looking at really big picture and very individualized effects for certain people. So it comes down to, is an artificial or non-nutritive sweetener helpful for you to meet your goals? So we typically talk about with dietary changes really 3 different options: frequency, portion, or substituting. So frequency, if you're using a non-nutritive sweetener, let's say for different beverages to add to your sweet iced tea, frequency, it's just saying I'm going to have sugar in my iced tea Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? You're saying bounds around frequency. Portion, it's just portioning out how much sweetener you would actually use for sugar, or it's substituting. It's usually using one of these non-nutritive sweeteners. So you don't have to use them if it's something that you find really doesn't help from a craving standpoint. For you individually, that it could make it worse. That's your experience. Try out one of the other 2. It could be frequency that you set bounds around for your goals, or it's portion sizes. None of these are the right way of doing it. It's figuring out which one's the best for you. So ultimately, you don't have to use those. But for many people, they find it to be a really good tool for them to be able to have something sweet that's 0 or few calories, and they don't have that craving afterwards. So if that's you, wonderful. Utilize that tool. If it's not working well for you, then it might be good to look at different options. So yeah. I think we're on the same page on this one, Erica.
Definitely. I think like just paying attention, I think, is really helpful to how it impacts you. And if you are someone who's noticing these cravings, which is why you asked the question, it might be something to pay attention to, and just know that it's not, made up. It's not in your head, and it's valid. So, but yeah, there are a lot of people who find success with making these substitutions. And for those people, getting off the sugary beverages makes a greater impact on weight management than the substitution does. So that's, very helpful to just stay aware of. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a dietary question that's more surgically based that I'll hit on, and then we'll come back to some of the more eating cues based items. So we do have an anonymous question around the pouch reset diet. So this is where individuals will typically go back to the immediate post-operative diet of starting off with all liquids and working their way back up. There are few studies actually showing that it does change the anatomy of your stomach. So we don't expect it to actually help with, let's say, tightening up a pouch or narrowing your sleeve very much. That's really not something that we would expect dietary change to be able to do. If you're worried about the size of your stomach currently, call us. We can discuss and see if we need to get some additional testing to see what's going on. What typically ends up happening and what you hear about for those pouch reset diets is that they're very structured, rigid, and restrictive. And for most individuals, those types of structured, rigid, restrictive diets do produce some level of weight loss. The challenge is with the sustaining it over time. It's typically not a durable weight loss, and many times can be I don't want to say false weight loss, but it could be related to just having liquids for an extended period of time as well. So that gets really complex. What I would say is there's typically not a whole lot of harm to trying to go back to a set structured dietary pattern. That's why meal replacements work so well for people. That could be a good option for someone if they're struggling with weight regain, is to look at more structured changes to help them reach their goals and then transitioning into their next stage goals. But I would strongly suggest, we have 8, soon to be 9 dietitians on the team. Pick up the phone and call us. Talk to a dietitian. That's what we're here for. We'll help you figure out what's the best approach for you on that goal that you're trying to reach right now. So just to transition over and give our guests an opportunity, do you have any additional comments on those types of structured dietary approaches, Erica?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you really hit the nail on the head with they're really effective for some short-term changes. I think that this is also something that's very individualized. Some people do well with knowing, like, just tell me what to do and I will do it, and having that kind of guideline. Other people find that it kind of taps into some of that all or nothing mentality of, well, if I can't do this, then it's not perfect, and then I, might as well just, go off, I failed. And it can kind of trigger some of those, what we think about too too from a psychology standpoint that can get in the way of long-term results. So I think, really thinking about what you're able to do forever is a really important way to kind of think about such a significant lifestyle change. So, figuring out with your dietitian team, the great support team that we have, is just what are you willing to do and what works for you individually. So like Colleen mentioned, pick up the phone and be willing to collaborate with your team to get that support and figure this out for the long haul, not just short term.
Yeah. And so, Erica, I love this question. It's from an anonymous individual, so I don't know who submitted it, but this is quite possibly at the top for me in terms of questions that we've received today. Why do salads always taste better when someone else makes them?
Such an interesting question and very true. I honestly don't know, but I feel like there's some kind of marketing opportunity here if we could figure the answer out. Colleen, do you have anything that comes to mind just about preparation? I wonder if there's certain things in the ingredients. I'm not sure if maybe there's some of like the higher calorie stuff sneaks in. I don't know if you had any initial knee-jerk reactions to it.
Yeah, I think a few different notes on this. If you're getting it prepared at like a restaurant or a chain, many times they tend to be higher calorie than if you're preparing it yourself. So something to look out for, that delicious factor may be a high calorie item that's in there. So certain, let's say Caesar salads from some of the chain restaurants can be 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 calories once you add the chicken and the dressing and the croutons and everything else. So watching out for that, namely. But also, I think that this is a fantastic phenomenon that I don't know if I know enough about the literature, but I will say from a dietary standpoint, one thing that most chains have gotten really well are these flavor pairings and figuring out what really complements each other when it comes to salad additions, the type of lettuce, the dressing with it. So if you notice, some of the most popular salads that you'll end up seeing have very specific combinations, like a leafy green like spinach with goat cheese, cranberry, caramelized pecans or other nuts, right? Like that's a classic combination and it hits all the flavor profiles. So it could also be trying to look at home, what type of flavor profiles can you create that you've seen in major commercial salad industries. I will also say though, I don't know the evidence base behind this, but Erica, you may be able to speak to this as well. There is just something about not having to prepare your own food that for many individuals, it makes it part of the experience. And for those of us who have been home for an extended period of time or working remotely, may value food a little bit more when we don't have to prepare it at this point. Yeah. Others may find that preparing it themselves really gives them ownership and they find more value and I guess rewarding feelings out of it. But everyone's different with that. But I love that question. It was such a good one.
No, that is good. I think the only thing I would add to that is you just also thinking about like the presentation of it. I'm just thinking of like the last time I made a salad for myself at home, like I didn't get out 10 beautiful ingredients and put them together in this, nice looking presentation the same way that's done at restaurants. So, if you do find that flavor profile you really like and you're willing to kind of take the time to assemble something that feels a little bit more finessed and well done, I think there is something with a beautiful presentation too that it's a little bit of an act of self-care for healthy food and feeling really good about it from kind of the inside out. So I'm just thinking about the last sad salad I made for myself and it just didn't fit that beautiful criteria.
That's great. And I have to mention here, we have someone in attendance right now who has been a chef in the past. We have Chuck on again with us this week. We're thankful to have you with us, Chuck. His comment is the freshest ingredients and seasonings, well-balanced dressings, and very good olive oil and balsamic. Honey, not sweeteners. Oh yes, there's a lot that can be done with a good homemade simple salad dressing. It can really take a salad up a notch, absolutely. And using some of the simplest, freshest, high quality ingredients. I think that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to make a good salad is because it has to be done simply. It's not something that can typically, you can cover something up that's a poor ingredient easily. So that might be why we recognize it so easily when we have a subpar salad. Yeah. Excellent. So, Erica, I will give you a moment here as we start to wrap things up and come to a close. If you have any final comments or words of encouragement for our attendees today.
Yeah, I mean, I think just keeping in mind, like you have a lot of power and control in this situation, not from the perspective of willpower, where you have to try harder than you're already trying, where you all are doing so much already. But doing a little bit of finesse around your environment can just help things seem a little more, give you that ease and grace through this time period that a lot of people find stressful, and just allow you to remove some of the emphasis from the food and really focus on, like, what connection do you want to have with the holiday? Is it with your family maybe that you haven't seen in a while, whether it's on Zoom or in person? And again, please stay safe as your main priority. But just thinking about kind of using the environment as another way to just make this process feel more second nature over time, setting those new habits, prioritizing yourself, and coming at it from this lens of self-care, because I really think that's at the heart of this, and why you all have gone to such great lengths to do this for yourself, is that you want something more. You want to feel prioritized and cared for. And there are a lot of ways that you can do that during the holidays. So think about that as, you know, the role of the environment and your power to interact with it in a way that supports your goals instead of goes against them.